knife, tack cloth. We've got sandpaper, roller covers. These are foam roller covers. We have liners, and of course we have our primer. We have Extreme Bond Primer. These are the two products we use, Sherwin-Williams Pro Classic, and if you're Benjamin Moore Advanced. Two products we use. We have paintbrush, we have a caulking gun, and of course we have our paint pot. So we've spread out all of our materials. We've taken the time to cover our surface. We recommend that all of you cover your countertops. We use rosin paper. You can use whatever you want. There's thicker products at the paint stores that you can certainly use, but we use rosin paper, tape it down nice and tight. We also have taken the luxury of opening up our drop cloth and putting it on the surface of where we're going to work. You should keep in mind that whenever you are going to be painting, you need to be painting in an area where the temperatures are above freezing all the time. So we chose this area. If you have a heated garage or a basement, that's great too. So that being said, that's the materials. This is the covered area. Now we're going to get into the first phase, which is it's basically breaking the cabinet down. So Todd's going to go ahead and do this for us. We want to start by taking all the hardware, unscrewing all the hardware. Todd's going to unscrew this hardware.
Try not to wreck the door.
Yeah, don't ruin the door. And we're going to name the hardware and the door 1 through 100. Nothing's going to get duplicate numbers. So this is door number 1. This hardware is going to be all numbered. So he's taking off the top right now. So this is the most important part of the project. He's going to take off the top hinge. Now that's hinge number 1. And you're going to put with your pen or a marker, you're going to put number 1 at the top of the hinge where the hinge was. And then you're going to put a piece of blue tape over it.
Yep. I'm just going to label this first. Hinge number 1, top. So we know which hinge it goes to. And then I will put a piece of tape over this.
Yeah, we cover that now. So when you paint, the number will still be there.
Yep, paint right over that. And then I'll go to the bottom. Label this 1B right here.
So now the door has 1T and 1B.
And then I take all of my parts and I put them in a Ziploc bag numbered 1. And then that way we don't lose any screws. You know which where it goes back, which hinges goes to which hole in this, because all hinges are different. Sometimes they if you use the wrong hinge, it might not sit back properly when we're done, and you might be off a little bit. That's why we number them. That's why it's important to do it, because if you don't, when you put them back on, it might not line up correctly. So this is why we do all this. So that's back to you, Sheldon.
So now we've got door number 1. We're going to do that process. So if you have 100 doors, it's all going to be numbered 1 through 100. So it's impossible to mix up the doors. You're going to have a T and a B, so it's impossible to mix up the hinges.
So when he says 1 through 100, so this is 1, this would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we come down 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, so on and so forth. So that's how the numbering system works.
As far as your drawers, you would also do the drawers the same way. The drawers can be numbered 1 through 100 as far as drawers are concerned. And we want to take the face of the drawer off, not the whole drawer itself. So can you show the back of that?
So all cabinets are different. This one happens to have just 2 screws holding in the face of the cabinet. Some older cabinets don't have this option, and you might have to take the whole cabinet out.
Right.
But this one has, you can just take it off, and this would be two.
That would be one.
Yep.
Here we've got this numbered is drawer 2, D2.
Yep. And labeled it right here on the cabinet itself. We're gonna put a piece of tape over it. Same thing. We put the hardware in a bag, so we don't lose it and it goes back into its natural spot. So that's that. We could just leave this off right now.
Okay, so the reason why the numbering system is so important is because at the end of the job, at the end of when you want to finally put all your doors and your drawers back, if you don't have them numbered properly, it's going to be like a puzzle. It's going to take you hours to figure out where these doors go. So we always say that the numbering is the safest part. After you get all the doors and drawers off, we're now going to get into the preparation phase of the doors and drawers. Now, I'm going to say this. We always do through the whole process, so I don't have to keep on talking about the front and the back. We always start off every process with the back of the door first. We're going to anticipate everyone on this call is going to be brushing and rolling their doors and not spraying. However, if you were to spray and you did go out and get the handheld sprayer and you want to spray, that's great. If you're that aggressive or that handy, then I would suggest that you spray on cardboard first to learn the technique of spraying down. Everything that we talk about today, the sequencing can happen the same way. If you're going to use a sprayer, instead of brushing and rolling, you would just use a sprayer. But for our discussion today, we're going to talk about brushing and rolling. So we're going to get into the preparation stage first. We're going to talk about obviously the back first. We're going to talk about wiping it down with a liquid deglosser or a cud crutter. This is a product that we just want to get the grease off it.
I have a question. Tammy is thinking about buying new hardware and pulls.
Yes.
Would you recommend?
So we're going to get into spackling in a minute, but if you want to get new hardware and pulls, then the time to do it is before you take your cabinets down and before you start painting it. You want to make sure that you've got all the holes either line up, or if you've got new holes, then you're going to have to drill new holes. And then when we get to the spackling stage, you would spackle the old holes. So right now we're getting into the cleaning.
And you want to put your gloves on.
With that primer and paint, is it necessary to sand?
Yes. Yep. So we're not there yet. We're gonna right now we're gonna degloss the doors.
This is an important step. If you've got doors, you just put a little on a rag. This is called cud crutter. And then what we just simply do is we wipe it down really. You give it a firm wipe down. You want to get any wax or grease off of see how there's stuff coming off. Any wax or grease is very important to get off. This is probably the most important step as far as your finish goes. If you don't get all the grease and the wax off of your cabinets, there's not going to be proper adhesion. So your final coat may go into failure, or it might chip easier. So this is an important part of the process, is wiping it down really hard like this, getting all the grease off, which we just did. And that should be good enough.
Okay, so now you're going to do that process on all of your cabinets, cabinet doors. Backs first, then the fronts, right? So now all your kitchen cabinets have just been, the only thing you've done is degreased them. You're not, that's just the next step after cleaning them is to fill any holes or any imperfections. So if you were going to put new hardware on, the time to put new hardware on is now, is to drill the holes now, because now we're going to spackle all the old holes. And if you don't have any, if you're not changing the hardware, then the only things that you want to spackle are any imperfections that you see in the door. Might be a seam, might be a little crack in the door. So Todd would go ahead and use wood filler.
Just your wood filler, and just any kind of a spackle putty knife. And then for say you're going to change the handles on it, and you've drilled a hole here and here, so you want to cover these holes up. That's what we'll pretend we're going to do today. You just take some wood filler, smooth it out. This might take a couple applications to get it so you can't see this hole. So that's one hole. And that's two holes.
I have a question here. How do you tell if you have an oil-based paint on your existing doors?
Okay, so regardless of what finish you have on your doors or no finish at all, it could be a bare wood. We are going to get to the priming stage. Once we get to the primers are universal. So once it's primed, you don't have to worry about whether it's an oil or a latex that was on your doors. So right now we've done the wood filling portion. Just to note, it's important to wood fill before you prime because we want the primer to seal the wood filler. Okay, so now we're going to get into the sanding part of this. We've spackled the doors. Now Todd's going to start on the back, and he's going to sand.
Yep. So we use a nothing too aggressive. You don't want to leave. This happens to be 180 grit. You can use some 220, 180. I would say the lowest is probably 150.
Yeah.
You don't want to get too aggressive sandpaper because it will leave marks when you sand, and you will see that through your finish coat. So basically, you want to sand with the grain. Just quick, and now this grain goes this way on this cabinet, so I'm going to sand this way. Real simple. And then this goes back. Like that this way. You want to give it a good firm sand. Now, some people use orbitals for this. Orbitals are the machines, the sanding machines. If you have too aggressive sandpaper on it, it will leave swirl marks. So that's why we like to hand sand it with a finer sandpaper. It doesn't leave those marks behind. You get your edges real good. You know, there we go. And this door is about ready.
Okay, so now take note, Todd just sanded this door. I don't think it took more than 2 minutes. So the preparation phase on each side of the door is not extreme on a natural door. However, Todd, show them a door that was previously painted. Okay, so now he's gonna go to a door that obviously has paint on it, and he wants to have feathered edges.
Yep, this paint job was not properly primed. This is what can happen to a door when it's not properly primed. So, you know, we'll just sand up, feather out the edges. Yeah, this is going to take a little more time because there's a lot more coming off, but you can feel it's nice and smooth now. There's no, see right here is an example where the paint is coming up. So I want to get smooth that. They call it feathering the edge. And I got a little piece right here. I'll get rid of that with my knife. And then that is smoothed out. I can't feel anything. There's no bumpiness there. So that is a smoothed out feathered edge. So this, like Sheldon said, will take you a little more time if you see stuff like this.
And you may want to use
Nice and smooth.
You may want to use a heavier grit sandpaper when going with a more aggressive door that needs a lot more preparation. Obviously, a door that has this kind of condition is probably going to take about 5 to 7 minutes of real dedicated preparation time. So a natural is going to take a couple minutes. A painted surface that is in paint failure, it could take up to 5 minutes. And that's when we would suggest that you go down to the 150 grit sandpaper to try to get all the heavy paint off. Once you've prepared the doors with sanding, you've sanded the backs, you've sanded the fronts, and you feel comfortable that the edge is feathered, you feel comfortable that you've cleaned them correctly, you've sanded them correctly. Now you're going to get into the priming of the doors.
Before we get into the primer, we want to make sure that we've used a throwaway dust brush or a vacuum or something to get all of the dust from your sanding and preparation. This I can just use the same cloth that I used for originally wiping them down with the crud cutter. This will work just fine for the priming process. So I'm going to wipe it down again. I want to get the surface dust free. Whoops. So it looks like we are pretty much dust free. And then I'm going to get my primer here.
So normally we'd have a vacuum out, but we didn't want to pierce everybody's ears. So normally you would vacuum that. And there's one important little step here, especially on a natural surface. We would want to make sure that you use the liquid deglosser one more time, like Todd just wiped that down. You only want to liquid degloss what you are going to prime in 30 minutes. So go ahead and just liquid degloss one door and then go ahead and prime it. See how long that process is going to take you, and then multiply it out. And then you'll know how many doors you can liquid degloss the backs of before you prime it. So the liquid deglosser only holds its ability for 30 minutes. After that, it disappears. So you only degloss what you can paint in 30 minutes. Okay, Todd, so now get into the primer.
So now I've got my extreme bonding primer right here from Sherwin-Williams. And this is my little pot that I'm going to be working out of today. It's got a liner in it. You can buy this at Sherwin-Williams as well. It's got, the reusable liners. And I'm going to have my screen or grid, and I plop it right in here. And then I've got my zip roller, as they call it. And this is their 4-inch black foam. Like Sheldon said, you can get all the material lists after this, but this is what we're going to use for today. And then I have, of course, my brush. This is just a 2.5-inch 30 latex brush, and these are the tools that I will need. And now we'll go over to my.
So now you're going to want to have we have used 2 sawhorses and a plank, and we've covered the plank with rosin paper, and we put the drop cloth down below. So as you can see, you could pick a bedroom, you could pick a room in your house to actually do this work, as long as you protect the floors. So now we're going to start on the backs first.
Yep. So let's go over. Wipe this real quick. Good to go. All right. So now what we're going to use the brush for is to get these little edges right around here. The foam roller won't get in there good enough. So we'll take the brush first. And you're just going to simply go right around the edge here. You can be sloppy on this because we're going to go over it with a foam roller after this. So you get your little edge right here and underneath. And then you're going to want to get, your outside edge here. We can get that with a foam roller too, but I like to get it a good brush. Okay, go from there, and then I'll get into the foam rollers right after this. All right, so that's my brush. I'm going to leave that right here. I'll take my foam roller with my little screen, get it in real good, and then you just simply roll it.
We use a foam roller because it leaves the least amount of orange peel, and it gives you a closer look to a sprayed finish than any other type of roller.
Yeah, when might not look like it now, but when the finished paint goes on, it sits down really nice. You can barely tell that it was rolled and not sprayed.
Notice Todd is rolling with the grain of wood, just like he sanded. Everything's the same. Everything's the same. We start on the back of the door. We go with the grain, just like we did when we prepped it. He cut in the small edge. He rolled with the grain. And now he's got the back of the door has been primed.
Yep.
Got a question here.
Yep.
Should primer always be white? I am thinking about navy blue for bathroom cabinets.
Good question.
Great question.
You can, no, I would suggest that to save yourself some steps, some multiple coats, I would go to the store, paint store. You can go to, like I said, we use Sherwin-Williams, but they can tint any primer. It might not be the same color, but if you're going with a dark blue, they're going to give you maybe a primer tinted, so like maybe to a dark gray or something that will make it easier for your paint to cover. So you won't need as many coats. So that's a great question. They can tint primers. I know, for instance, red. If you're using a red color, even on your walls, they suggest a primer tinted to gray because it helps cover. The reds and yellows are tough to cover. So yes, that's a good question, and they will be able to point you in the right direction. Any paint store, Sherwin-Williams, any paint store will be able to help you with that.
So one thing we want to point out now, regardless of the color primer that you've chosen, on a natural wood surface, we suggest that you put 2 coats of primer. So this primer, the Extreme Bond, takes 30 minutes, okay, to dry, to touch, and it takes 1 hour before you can recoat. So that's why we want you to do the backs first. So you can take the back of this door. You've done this back of this door. You're going to let it sit. Now you're going to do the next door, and you're going to do the same process. Yes. If it's a painted door, like that door, you only need 1 coat of primer. The reason we want 2 coats on the bare wood is for coverage. But on this particular door, you can do 1 coat. Now, depending on how much bare wood you have, so on this particular door, just the front was painted by someone. The back would get 2 coats. You can never go wrong by putting 2 coats of primer. Then you can put 1 coat or 2 coats. But on a stain, so 2 coats, possibly 1 coat. But if you have a lot of bare wood, we would suggest 2 coats. Yes.
We'll go over a painted painted.
Now Todd's going to prime a previously painted door.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Same technique.
Yep, I'm gonna get my edges that are bare because it seems like there was a problem here. Oops, and there's a little hair from the brush.
So I have stained wood. 1 set of doors I would like to paint white, and the other set I want a lighter stain. Do I skip the primer for stained wood, or is there something that I would need to use to seal the wood before I stain?
Okay, so we're really going over a painted, taking your cabinets and turning them into a painted surface. If you want to stain your cabinets, or you have a natural cabinet that you want to just finish, we would recommend the same process, wiping the preparation part, no wood filler, and then you would want to touch up any bare wood with a stain that matches the stain color of your cabinets, and then you would use a polyurethane to top coat. So you would use polyurethane as we are using primers and finish coats.
Still very important to clean them though.
Yes, yep. So you see Todd is just, now this is a raised panel cabinet door. And Todd is using his whiz roller, and he's using it on all edges of his door. He's using it on the beveled edge, and he's using it on the raised panel edge.
Yeah. All right.
And then he's going to go with the grain of the wood, even though you can't see the grain of the wood.
And there we go. There is a primed. And now you can see where Sheldon was talking, maybe it needs a second coat of primer on these areas that were down to bare wood.
Yes.
They didn't cover so well. I mean, it might get away with that. You might be able to cover them with finished paint, but if there's some question, you might as well do it with primer because it dries faster and it's a better for the end product.
Will grain on oak be filled with 2-coat primer?
Excellent question. So, no, it will not. If you have an oak grained cabinet, and you can show over here, Shayla, here is an oak grained cabinet. You can see the grain of the oak. It's been previously painted. You can still see the grain. Here is here's a more maybe like a maple or a finished cabinet that does not have the grain. There is a product that you can put on here.
It's called
Aquacoat.
Yes. We don't have that. I mean, we've used it, but you could use wood filler. It's called Aquacoat. You could get it at, I believe it's Home Depot who sells it. I'm sure there are other places who sell it as well. Basically, it's kind of like my wood filler, but it's a little easier to work with. And you would need where's my putty knife over here? And basically all you're doing to get rid of all this grain, if that's what your bottom, you don't like that, you just basically taking, and I'll go over it, and doing like a skim coat of all. This is not the proper product for it, but this is what you're going to do with that aqua coat. It's filling in, and you can see kind of all these dark areas where it stayed. That's the grain of the wood being filled by this. So you can do it with wood filler. It's a little harder to work with. So I would probably go with that aqua coat. But yes, this will help fill in the grain. But regardless of what you use, you probably still will see the grain of the wood from oak. It's just, it's one of those things. We can dull it, but you can't necessarily get rid of it.
Right.
That's just oak.
Can you just show the primer?
Yeah.
Someone joined late and they want to see the primer.
Yep.
So to the person asking for primer,
This is Chem Bond primer. It's a fast drying product.
Extreme bond.
I mean, extreme bond primer, and it will adhere to all surfaces.
Okay.
All right. So now we come back to the priming portion of the. Let's use this door for the caulking. So Todd has now primed the back of the doors. He's primed the front of the doors, and the base unit. The base unit is. Todd's going to show you how to prime the base unit. Remember, regardless if the base has been painted before or stained, you're going to want to prime it. Before you prime it, we suggest that you tape off right over here. Let's show this, Shayla. We suggest that you tape the bottom edge of your cabinet on the bottom drawer, so that if your brush goes over, it hits the tape and not the drawer, and not the base of the cabinet. The other place that we suggest that you tape off is the edge of the shelves. If the shelves are removable, you can take them out. Like these are removable. If they're not removable, just tape the edges so when you paint the edge, you don't get any paint on your shelves.
and he did it there too.
Okay, so now Todd's going to show you the technique, and this is important. Remember, we want to always finish paint the way we prime. So Todd's going to show you how we paint a cabinet frame.
We're going to do the edge here first, all the edges first. See, somebody already hit, that's what Sheldon said. If you can see that, I don't know. Somebody already did this and hit the inside edge, and now you got paint all over it. Now you got to remove it. But that's the whole point of the purpose of taping off. So you got that edge, and then we've got this edge. We do first, and you don't have to worry about brush strokes yet because you're gonna go over this again. So that's the side edge, and then we've got this edge. And then we've got finally the bottom edge.
And don't be afraid to have a step ladder so you can see what you're painting. Todd happens to be a little taller than me, so he doesn't need one, but I would need one. And so you can actually see the edge so you know what you're hitting. Now?
And then now we're gonna do the same thing we did with the door. Basically the doors, you just go in with the grain. Now, if your shelves do come out, you could simply use this zip roller to do the edges, and it's not close to the inside. If there's like right here, there was a return, so I'm not going to be able to. I wouldn't hit the inside of the cabinet if I use this. So you can use this if you got the right cabinet base, but that's basically.
Now, I think it's important for everyone to understand, Todd just did it with his roller. The reason why we paint the little edge first, always when painting, paint the little edge first, because if you paint the face first and then the little edge, then what happens is the paint rolls over onto the face of the surface and you end up going over that again. So to avoid that step, paint your little edge first, then the face. So now what you have is you've worked on your doors first, and your doors, you've worked on all the back of your doors, then it's dried. While the back of the doors you primed, now you're going to go to your cabinet bases and you're going to prime those. And then you would flip your doors over once they're dry. You would prime the front of your doors, right? You would go back to your base. You'd put the second coat of primer on your base if necessary. You would go to your doors and you would put the first coat of primer on the front of your doors. Let them dry, flip them over to the back, and repeat. Back of the doors would get a primer coat, the second primer coat, let them dry, flip them over to the fronts, put the second coat of primer on the fronts, and now you are ready to do the next step, which is caulking.
Yes. Well, just so everyone's clear that the base it has the same prep as the doors.
Yeah.
You want to wipe them down, you want to sand them, wipe them off again, prime them, paint them.
Right.
So caulking. So I've got my caulking gun here. I've cut a little hole. You don't want to cut, a big chunk off. You want a little tiny hole. So a lot, you're working with just a little bit of caulking. Now, you want some people want to caulk this inside edge because they don't like the look. So I will do the little caulking right here. You should probably have a wet rag, so you can wipe the excess off.
Do the wet rag for you, Todd.
Okay. Now I want to take my glove off because I like to do it this way first. Just really get in that edge. Clean that up with your 5-in-1, and then you go over it with it can be really wet. It's not that wet. So, and just go over it and make it nice and smooth. Any excess in the corners, you take a your little tool here, 5-1 or a putty knife. You get the excess out of the corners, and then that's it. It's probably going to take, it takes a while for the caulking to dry. And beware though, some of these panels, cabinet panels they're floating, they're moving. So this is a base and the panel sits into it. You could run into issues if you're home in the summertime when it's hot and humid out and they expand. And then in the wintertime, they contract and it might leave the caulking splits in here sometimes. So it's all preference really of if you can live with this little line right here and not caulk it in. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little line right here.
Shadow line.
Yeah. If you can live with that, I would not suggest caulking them. If you hate that look and you want to get rid of it, caulk it. It will hold up, but eventually it will crack in there and you'll have to recaulk it and touch it up.
Now, one point I might add here is notice that we did wood filler before we primed and we did caulking after we primed. That's because we want our caulking to adhere to a sound primed surface. Wood filler is meant to go onto wood. So, but if we put the wood filler on after we've primed and then put finish over the wood filler is going to bleed through the finish paint, and you're going to see a shadow line or a rough spot wherever the primer is. So we wood fill before we prime, and we caulk after we prime.
All right, next step.
All right, so now we've got the doors are completely prepared. They've been primed, they've been caulked. Now, only caulking on the front we would recommend if we even recommend it, right? If you have to do it, only do it on the front. Don't do it on the back, even if there's a shadow line there. Now that we've got the doors have been prepared, now we want to get into the finished paint of the door, which is obviously the most important. The first finish coat, again, we're going to do the back side first. Back side is going to be done first. Todd now is going to get into the.
I switched over to another the finished paints that we use, which is Pro Classic or Advanced. They're both good products for finishing cabinets. So for this drill, I'm using Pro Classic.
And now notice we haven't sanded. We have not sanded the primer coat. We're strictly going to put the first finish coat on the unsanded surface.
And then we're going to get our edge, inside edge again, same process as the priming. Get all the edges. All right, I think that should be good. And then we will get the foam roller. And then we're gonna get this inside portion.
And he rolls the same way he rolls with the finish. I mean, with the primer, he rolls with the grain of wood.
Now we roll right over the tape.
That's why we use the tape, so you can roll right over it.
All right, I think it does. So that will be one finish coat.
Okay, so now that we've done the finish coat on the back, we're going to recommend 2 finish coats always. They're going to let this dry. We're going to want you to let this dry for a good day, right? You're not going to try to force your coats to finish. You want to let this dry for 24 hours before you flip them over. Again, we want to do the backs first, and we're going to flip over the door, and we're going to do the fronts first. You might ask, why do we keep on doing it back? Because we always want the last coat that we do to be the front of the door facing up. So now we don't have to flip it over again. It's done. right? That's when we're gonna take the door, put the hardware back on it and put it back up where it belongs. So we put the first finish coat on. After the first finish coat is when we are going to give it a light sand. We don't sand on the primer coat because if you take the sandpaper and burn an edge, Todd, why don't you show them what burning an edge would look like?
Well, right here. See, I'm burning that edge right there. And it's so small that it's tough to cover with multiple coats. It's an edge that doesn't have anything, and it will take multiple coats to cover that burned edge, as they call it. And there was one right here, as you can see. That's with the priming, and it still shows up, that burnt edge.
So if he sanded that at the primer coat, it would expose that to bare wood again, and now we're strictly putting finish coats on. So we want to we don't want to sand the primer, we want to get our first finish coat on. Then once the first finish coat is completely dried, before we do our final finish coat, we wanted to give it a very light sand. This is when you can actually use the 220 sandpaper that you used when you did the original preparation, save it. And you can use that used, worn down, that 220 is probably now 300.
Yeah.
And you can just give it a light sand with a 300 sandpaper or a knockdown version of, you don't need to use a brand new sheet of 220 because you just want to take off any imperfections that might be there. The other thing that you can do is the hardware stores or the paint stores, they sell sanding blocks. They look like little sponges, right? Sanding sponges is what they call, and they're flexible. And you can use one of those to light sand before your final finish coat. So now Todd is going to show what the final finish coat would look like.
Over here, well, it's the same process. Don't really have this is still kind of wet, but it's the same process here. I mean, you don't necessarily, you'll just use the brush and cut in your edges again. If you have any edges right around, and then same process, you take your foam roller and you work your way out. You start in the middle and then then you do your edges last. And then, so you're working your way out and then you let it dry and you are good to go.
That's right. So as you can see, it's like watching, HGTV. It looks a lot easier when they skip around, but we've done the doors. Your doors are now in a place where they're drying. And once they've dried, now you've got to put the doors back up on the hardware. You may need assistance. Sometimes it's easier to do with two people, but the easiest way to put the hardware back on is the same way you took it off, right? So you've got the doors are already down. You want to flip that door over. You might want to use a towel or a blanket to make sure you have a nice soft surface, because that finish paint, if you can wait 48 hours or 2 days, that's great too. The longer you can wait with a latex paint, the better off you are. So flip that door back over now, and now you want to put your hardware on the door first. You get out you just simply pull the
Your bag?
yeah,
It says-
you just want to pull off your tape. Of course, this door is wet, but if
Right.
it was dry, you would pull off your tape and you'd say, okay, that's door number 1. So now you go to the hardware
Oh, I got my door number 1 hardware.
right here.
And I take it off, and because it is wet, we won't, but you get the gist. I got my hinges. They're numbered. 1B means 1 at the bottom, and the top is right there, the other one. So this is the top and this is the bottom. So I would put my hinge on, and then I would be able to lift my cabinet up and hold it kind of in place with the hinge, and then find your holes that are in the base, and then attach your hinges to the base.
Now, this is when you may need some help.
Yeah.
So if you got someone to hold that door while the other person puts the screws in, sometimes very helpful. Than trying to do it all by yourself. It becomes a little bit more difficult. I would tell you that if you are going to do it by yourself, the doors are they're light. Most doors are light. And I would recommend if getting one screw in the bottom hinge, right? And then getting one screw in the top hinge and then filling in the field. Don't try to get all three in the bottom one and then get all three in the top one. The other thing is when you're putting the hardware back, don't screw in the screw as tight as you can get it. Wait till you get all the screws set. Then you want to screw in the screws so they're hand tight. Make sure the door closes. But again, the hinges came exactly where they came from, so they all should close. Now, Shayla, I'd like to show them this hinge system over here. Many of you may have this hinge system, which is more of a hidden hinge system than exposed hinge system. And these are just as important because if you get these mixed up, they've all been adjusted by the installer originally. And if you get them mixed up, your doors are going to be crooked and they're not going to line up. So you want to make sure that, again, you number your hardware correctly. So now you have seen that if with proper preparation and with the proper amount of coats, that you can paint your kitchen cabinets. The thing to keep in mind is that we recommend everyone takes their products out of their cabinets so you don't get any dust in them. We recommend that you put the proper amount of coats in. And the one thing to remember is if you plan on doing the kitchen cabinets and it's going to take you a long period of time, you do not want your primer coat to sit for more than 30 days, right? So if this is a project that you're going to come down or you're going to leave and go someplace else and you're going to prime it in February and you plan on putting a finish coat on in April, we would not recommend that. Okay, so we'd recommend that you prime it and within 30 days you're applying your finish coats. So that's really all of the process here. I'm not sure if anybody has any other questions, but we will be mailing you or sending you an email with with this product list and the steps taken, the to-do list on how to paint your kitchen cabinets. So if any portion of this you were unsure of, or you skipped over, or you missed, then we'll send you this copy to help you guys paint your kitchen cabinets like a pro. Does anybody have any questions? If not, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook for all our DIY classes. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and hope you all learned something today. Have a good day.
Happy painting.
Have fun.